Hello friends, this is the lesson number 31 in the series of criticism in English literature, and in this lesson we are continuing our journey about T.S. Eliot, his criticism. In the previous work or previous videos we discussed his essay Metaphysical Poets and Tradition and Individual Talent. In this part third, we shall discuss his essay Hamlet and his problems. If you have gone through Hamlet, just try to think of this work Hamlet. What sort of flaws you find in this work, and do you really feel that this is this work means all those scenes that you get in this play, all these scenes are perfect, and do you really find any sort of shortcomings or drawbacks? Then you can correlate your feelings to T.S. Eliot, what sort of flaws he finds. Before getting into this, there is one theory given by American poet, painter Washington Allston, objective correlative. This theory, objective correlative, first used by American poet Washington Allston in the mid-19th century. The same is being talked about by T.S. Eliot here. He says about this theory that it refers to an image. It refers to an image, action, situation, usually a pattern of images, actions, situations that somehow evokes a particular emotion from the reader without stating what the emotion should be. So you should go through this definition twice or thrice, only then you can produce a good meaning of it. Means the author has a clear intention of evoking a desired emotion in the reader. Any author, if he is showing or writing something, he has a clear intention in his mind that I want to evoke a particular emotion in the mind of the reader. But he does not really tell the reader about this, that I am going to tell you or I am going to show you some fear, I am going to present you with some happiness. No, he indirectly produces some images, some that sort of a descriptions, so that the reader feels that yes, there is some fear, you can say terror situation or horror situation or the situation of pleasant moments. So in reference to this quote given by T.S. Eliot, we can produce that behind every image or scene there is a purpose by the writer. Even in the movies you see that when there is any horror scene supposed to be performed on the stage or to be in the screen, then what do you see, that there are some night scenes, some dark scenes, some thunder clouds are there, then maybe human skull or some barking of the dogs or that sort of a scenes. All these images or pictures really contribute to produce a feeling or emotion in your mind that is of a terror. Similar way we see bright sunny scenes, then beautiful sky, beautiful flowers, trees, and beautiful river, chirping of the words, and then these things, what really they produce? They produce a beautiful scene, a scene of happiness in your mind. You can easily guess that now there will be a beautiful song. So that sort of a things present the theory of objective correlative. T.S. Eliot praises Lighthouse and Macbeth for means perfectly representing or presenting, we can say, the objective correlative. Like there is a scene in Macbeth when the lady Macbeth, in the scene of agony, she was in the sleep and she was walking in the night because she had committed a murder, and she really feels that horror, and that sort of a horror can also be felt by the reader. So that sort of action means the writer is showing us a scene where a lady is walking in the sleep. So that sort of a scene really produces a horror picture in the mind of the reader. But T.S. Eliot critically examined Hamlet, and he says that there are a number of flaws in this work. Even we do not really get to know that whether it is going to be a horror scene or pleasure scene. One scene I can tell you that in this play, when you find that Hamlet is there and holding a human skull in his hand, and he is simply talking to himself, and he is He is with full ease. He is no way feeling any sort of or showing fear or a terror, having human skull in his hand. Then what sort of a things Shakespeare is want to produce with that scene? We do not really know. Then what is the use of that human skull? If that human skull is not there to bring terror in the minds of the reader, then what is the purpose of using that skull? So that is where T.S. Eliot feels that William Shakespeare really failed in Hamlet, and he says that the play Hamlet and the character Hamlet both are equally problematic. And further he adds that actually there is a quote by him that Hamlet is an artistic failure as it has no objective correlative. Hamlet is an artistic failure as it has no objective correlative. And even one more, he says that Hamlet is the Mona Lisa of literature. Hamlet is the Mona Lisa of literature. By this he says that this work is interesting, but it is no way a work of art. Like in King Lear, we see there is a thunderstorm scene. With that scene, we can really feel the pity of or really the terrible condition of that King Lear. But in Hamlet, we do not really find those external, you can say, situations or those external environment that really contributing to produce some sort of feeling in us. So that is where we as a reader feel ourselves as confused, and we do not really have any sort of a emotional feeling by those scenes whichever we see in Hamlet. Like Hamlet is having a human skull in his hand, and we do not really have any feeling because that sort of emotions are not being produced by the author himself. Even Hamlet himself is not feeling. If Hamlet himself was feeling any sort of a terror or fear, we would have felt as well. But that is where William Shakespeare has failed, as T.S. Eliot is saying. So there is no depth in the emotions shown by William Shakespeare in the character of Hamlet. Then T.S. Eliot categorically remarks 3 points. First, he says that William Shakespeare borrowed the plot of revenge from, there is a playwright named Thomas Kyd. He wrote the famous work Spanish Tragedy. But he says that just by taking or borrowing a plot from that play does not really make Shakespeare successful, because he failed to use that objective correlative. He could not really add emotions in this work. That is where the reader could not really felt any sort of a sympathy towards Hamlet. Then he talks about in the second point the character of Hamlet. He was shown mad somewhere, and he was using his madness only to deceive people. We know that Hamlet wasn't mad. He was simply acting only to deceive the people surrounding him. But what happened by this, his madness actually aroused suspicion in the mind of his uncle Claudius. And by this we also see that Hamlet himself also delayed in taking revenge. So all these things are not justified. Why he delayed? Why he delayed in taking revenge? There is no proper excuse for this. And one last thing he says, that as we see the character of Hamlet, he is mature person. He is not any teenage guy who can be seen as confused or not able to commit or not able to take revenge. But being a mature person as Hamlet was in that play, why he could not able to deliver properly? These are the flaws as pointed out by T.S. Eliot. So one thing critically you can remember, that T.S. Eliot has criticized Hamlet, and he has praised Macbeth and Lighthouse. Okay, after this theory we have function of criticism. This is a work by T.S. Eliot and published in the year 1923. And actually there is a purpose behind this writing this work. There is one prominent writer, the name is J. Middleton Murray. J. Middleton Murray, and he wrote a work, Romanticism and Tradition. Romanticism and Tradition. And in this work, Murray challenged T.S. Eliot's views of tradition and individual talent. We discussed tradition and individual talent by T.S. Eliot. So whatever the views are given by T.S. Eliot in that essay, the same views are being challenged or disregarded, or you can say disapproved by J. Middleton Murray. So we shall now see this essay. This essay is now as a response to Murray. So remember, first T.S. Eliot wrote Tradition and Individual Talent. In response to this work, there came Romanticism and Tradition by J. Middleton Murray, and response to this work, response to Romanticism and Tradition, this work, we have this essay or this work written by T.S. Eliot, Function of Criticism, in the year 1923. In this essay, we have 4 parts. So part 1 talks about criticism. We shall analyze all these 4 parts one by one. In part 1, T.S. Eliot talks about criticism. He says that criticism is analysis of any literary work, and he says that there has to be some particular objective or goal behind any criticism we make. He says further that critics may differ in their opinion. It can be biased sometimes, as the critics may have their personal likes and dislikes, choices and preferences. But he says that one should go above their own likes and dislikes. Further, he adds that all these critics should come together and work in coordination. Only then they can produce a real criticism of any work. He further adds that the criticism should be done according to the work type. Like for tragedy, if we are evaluating or analyzing, then we should try to find whether it is really functioning as a tragedy, it is able to arouse pity and fear in the minds of the reader, and further whether there are elements of sadness or happiness or so. Similarly, if one is analyzing the comedy, then we can look for the elements of humor and comic and pleasure and happiness. So he's saying that to analyze different works, there has to be different parameters. In the part 2, he is talking about T.S. Eliot is giving actually his response to Murray. I told you that he is responding to Murray's opinion, what he gave in the Romanticism and Tradition in his work. So first, Murray had said, what were the Murray's view? Murray had said that classicism and romanticism cannot go together. Classicism is represented in the French literature according to him, and romanticism is being represented by the English writers. But T.S. Eliot says that English writers are also the classic ones and French are also the romantics. So he says that both can go together. So classics and romantics both can go together. So remember this fact. Sorry. So remember this fact, T.S. Eliot was in favor that classics and romantics both can go together. In part 3, Murray said that writer should follow principles for his work, and then comes the perfection. So he is advocating that the writer should go by his own voice, his own principles, and he should, a perfect artist, he's saying, keep past and present together. So simply Murray is advocating that one should go by his own principles, then he should write. But T.S. Eliot says that artist, if he is believing in his own voice, in his own principles only, then how can he follow the tradition, the great tradition? You remember that romantic writer also used to say that one should write whatever he feels. The same way Murray has said that one should go by his own inner voice. But T.S. Eliot says that if you go by only your inner voice, then how can you follow the great tradition of the past writers, the dead writers, what they have written? How would you be able to follow them? You won't be able to align with that great tradition. So what are the great, you can say, the examples of the great writers and their wisdom, their experience? You won't get advantage of that if you go through one novel first, then you write, or you simply write a novel. Do you find a difference? If you are writing without reading, you won't be able to write good. But if you have read a few of novels, okay, 2, 3, whatever, then you would be able to write somewhat good. But if you have read large variety of novels, then you are going to write, then definitely you are having a lot of advantage than others, because you have that experience of those writers, and that is the tradition that you have got from these writers, and now you are writing. So this is T.S. Eliot is saying that one should get the experience from the tradition by reading the other writers, and only then he should write. But Murray was saying that one should write by his own experience, and not own experience, in fact by his inner voice only. Then there comes the part 4 of this essay. There we have one name, that is Matthew Arnold, the previous critic that we discussed. Matthew Arnold said that he gave the opinion that there are two categories, like creative means you are producing something, and critical, you are criticizing something. And when you have these two acts, he says that creative act is better, means you are writing something that is way better than criticizing others. But T.S. Eliot is now giving opinion that criticism is also a creation. When you criticize others, you are also creating something. And further he adds that one should criticize his own works. Like you have written something and then you try to criticize it. That will really help your creativity. That makes your work together. So he says that criticism enhances creativity. And he further adds that no way we can consider criticism to be inferior than creativity. Criticism is in its own way is a creative process. Because if you are able to criticize other people or even your own work in a good way, then when you write at that time you can easily realize what is good or bad, or which are the things you need to avoid and which are the things that you have to bear in mind while writing. So your criticism is helping you to write quite well and effectively. Okay, that's it for this lesson. So in this lesson we discussed Hamlet and his problems and his concept of objective correlative, and then we have function of criticism, an essay by T.S. Eliot, where he criticized or responded to the views of Murray, J. Middleton Murray. And now the questions, the previous year questions. The first, Hamlet is an artistic failure as it has no objective correlative. It is said by T.S. Eliot. Another question, Hamlet is the Mona Lisa of English literature, and it is also said by T.S. Eliot, because this work, which is interesting but not a work of art. This work is interesting but not a work of art. Then theory of objective correlative is given by T.S. Eliot in which work? Hamlet and his problems. In another question, for whom T.S. Eliot said this? A thought to him was an experience. A thought to him was an experience. T.S. Eliot said this for John Donne. You know that he admired John Donne and Abraham Cowley for unification of sensibility, because he believes that all the metaphysical poets, They belong to the Elizabethan tradition. Another question. Disassociation of sensibility. This term is used by T.S. Eliot. Another question. Greatness of a poet, as Arnold says, lies in his powerful and beautiful application of ideas to life. These are the views of Matthew Arnold. Greatness of a poet lies in his powerful and beautiful application of ideas to life. But it is rejected by whom? T.S. Eliot. Because T.S. Eliot is saying that these lines or this line is not true. You know, there is a in the last segment we discussed that Matthew Arnold was considering creative faculty or creative art to be much better than the critical, but T.S. Eliot believes that creative and critical art both go together and both are equally good. So the same viewpoint is criticized here. Further, function of criticism is a work by T.S. Eliot. Another question, tradition and individual talent. The term traditional is used in a positive way by T.S. Eliot. Then another question, working of poet's mind is explained with chemical reaction by T.S. Eliot. Next question, analogy of catalyst. In the essay Tradition and Individual Talent, T.S. Eliot talked about the theory of filament of platinum, and it is compared to the mind of the poet. Then this association of sensibility. T.S. Eliot says John Milton and John Dryden, they are the masters of language but not of the soul. Remember this. And another question, progress of an artist is a continual self-sacrifice. Progress of an artist is a continual self-sacrifice. It is said by T.S. Eliot, because where he is talking about the artist should surrender his personality, should give up his personality, the theory of impersonality. And the last question, Hamlet and his problems, originally published in which book? That is published first in the Egoist magazine, but when we talk about the book, that is Sacred Wood. So that's been a long journey with T.S. Eliot, his criticism, his views, and after this we have one more writer, and then we start our discussion on cultural study and new criticism. So thanks a lot for watching this lesson. Have a great day.